These two Lego sets right here are really hard to compare because... Hey guys, this is JP's Lego Reviews. Today I'm going to compare the Lego Star Wars TIE Bomber set with set number 75347 to the Lego Star Wars TIE Striker set number 75154. So, simply, today we're going to compare the displayability, realism, value proposition, building experience, the playability, and the minifigure selection between these sets. So, let's break it down. Now, let's start talking about displayability for a minute, because this category is a bit difficult because both of these sets are quite displayable. Now, the TIE Striker and the TIE Bomber don't really have too many bad angles, and I want to say it's equal, but if you are going to display this set from a view where you'll see the underside of either set, then I have to say the winner is the TIE Bomber, simply because the underside of it is far cleaner looking than the TIE Striker. But the TIE Striker actually has a pretty clean look too, but it's not as clean looking as the TIE Bomber, and that's what counts. So let's move on to the realism factor of these two sets. Now, when it comes to the realism factor of these two sets, again, it's a difficult thing to score since both of them are pretty realistic looking, and I'm actually going to give it a tie because there's no real separating factor that makes the TIE Bomber or the TIE Striker, either one, slightly more accurate than another. And because there's simply really nothing to compare since they're roughly the same when it comes to realism, let's look at the value proposition of these two sets. Now, what about the value proposition of these two Lego sets? Well, I believe the TIE Striker set in Australia released for 100 Australian dollars, but I think it's in between 100 and 120 Australian dollars. And simply, even at 120 Australian dollars, it's still the better value. The reason why the TIE Striker is a better value than the TIE Bomber for 100 Australian dollars is simply the fact that, yeah, even though it's a lot longer, well, that actually is what makes it more valuable, simply because it's a physically larger build that uses a lot more large pieces to make it look a lot larger than what you may expect it to look. And because of how grand it looks, it really makes it feel like a better value proposition than the TIE Bomber. But now, let's move on to the building experience of these two sets. Now, when it comes to the building experience of these two sets, both of them have a pretty interesting building experience where you start from the core of a TIE vehicle or building the cockpit area or what's in the middle, and then you build outwards to eventually make the wings last. But I have to say, they're both pretty interesting builds, so overall, I give it, there's no real difference because, like, it's equal because of the fact that they're both equally interesting to build. There's a lot of interesting building techniques in both sets. With the TIE Striker, you have to manually shift up and down the wings. Meanwhile, with the TIE Bomber, it's a very complex build with the middle bit, since you have two bits of it instead of one for where the bombs can be dropped from. And overall, they're both quite interesting builds, but they both don't beat each other in any significant way. But now, let's look at the playability of these two sets. Now, here is one of the categories that is actually easier today. And the better set that is more playable is the TIE Bomber. The reason why is simply due to size. The TIE Striker is actually a very good looking set and it feels like great value for money. But it's a bit too large. You feel like you're having to carry a lot more than what you may expect. And a lot of the functions you can't easily do with one finger with the spring load shooters to letting down or up the wings. It's a two-hand operation, so if you want to play against another vehicle, well, it's harder to do that. And also, it's even harder to carry as well, simply because of the awkward shape of it. Meanwhile, with the TIE Bomber, everything is within reach of basically one hand, depending on how big your hand actually is. And this is just my hand for reference. And because of this, as well as the fact that it's really balanced quite well, so you can really maneuver it the way that you can want to. That makes the TIE Bomber a far better set to play with than the TIE Striker. But last but not least, let's look at the minifigure selection of these two sets. Now, when it comes to the minifigure selection, it's quite difficult to choose the best minifigure selection because they both have 4 minifigures and they're mostly pretty generic. But for me at least, there are 2 main standouts that make the TIE Bomber minifigure selection slightly more interesting than the TIE Striker. Firstly, the Darth Vader minifigure here is actually a very interesting and notable named character addition, as well as obviously the Gonk droid, which is the other interesting minifigure as well. And the TIE Pilot is made better in the TIE Bomber than the TIE Striker. Meanwhile, with the TIE Striker set, for me at least, the only main minifigure of interest is actually the Scarif Trooper. If there were 2 Scarif Troopers, or if there was another interesting troop, the TIE Striker would have actually beat the TIE Bomber. But because there's only one really interesting minifigure in the TIE Striker set, I have to give it to the TIE Bomber. And now, let's go through my final thoughts. Now, here are my final thoughts for the TIE Bomber versus the TIE Striker. Now, these 2 Lego sets right here are really hard to compare because they are so good. But if you were to give me a winner, and if I had to select a winner, it's going to be the TIE Bomber. The reason why is, firstly, in the point system, the TIE Bomber has 2.5 points versus 0.5 with the TIE Striker. Secondly, the TIE Bomber as a Lego set, if you detach anything else from it, is simply a better product than the TIE Striker. They are both very close, but the TIE Bomber does edge out the TIE Striker in displayability, playability, and the minifigure selection. Now, the only complaint I do have against the TIE Bomber is simply the fact that it could have been 90 Australian dollars instead of 100, but apart from that, it's practically a flawless set. Meanwhile, the TIE Striker is a really good set too, but the minifigure selection could have been improved, it could have been a bit more displayable, and it could have been easier to play with as well. But it's still a very good set, don't get me wrong. I recommend both of these sets since they're simply excellent. And if you had the money, or if you weren't too sure which one to get, do get both because they are very good sets. But the TIE Bomber is just a masterpiece. And simply, the TIE Striker, even though it's really good, simply couldn't compare. But that's actually pretty much it. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are down below in this comparison. If you enjoyed the video, please smash the like button. If you want to see more content just like this, please subscribe. Hope you guys have a magnificent day and keep building.